Welcome to my backyard. Maggie O'Halloran here, one of the educators at the Florida School of Holistic Living. And I am joined today with our current graduating class of family herbalist students. They'll be here, and you might hear them in the background, chatting about building your herbal apothecary. So you've probably taken some classes or seen some more videos, and you've been inspired to have herbs in your home yourself. Do 40 different things than it is to have 40 plants that each do one thing on their own. So first, think about where you want to have your herbs stored. In my home, I have a space that are my tea herbs, like things I might want in the morning or during the day to make teas with, but maybe also herbs I'd want to use to make tinctures in the future or something. And it's typically in a size jar that makes sense for being stored in that area. It's this little my tea cupboard in my kitchen. I have another area of my home that's more like bigger jars, or maybe herbs that I would really only work with as tinctures. It's also a place where I store extra tinctures, maybe I'm not working with immediately. So I have a spot in my kitchen that are herbs that I work with all the time in my personal life, and then I have another space where it's more backstock for those folks who work in restaurants and things like that, to have a backstock area. Either way, I want to make sure I have a lot of really good resources. So sometimes I hear about an herb either in a YouTube video or in one place on the internet or in a class, or maybe I read about it in a book. So my apothecary holds some of those resources. I have a materia medica. This is a spot where I put all of my herbal references, and I want to have at least 3 non-related sources on a plant before I'm using it in my home, for things beyond drinking things. I want to make sure I have labels, and labels can be anything really. You'll notice on this one, I have a post-it note. This is a post-it note that is attached to a jar. It's really a great label. You just want to make sure you have a label and a date. Because if I have a label and a date, then I know not only what's inside the jar, but when I put it there. And that's a really important part of having a label on things in your apothecary, because time is crazy, man. It kind of warps, and 5 years goes by like a flash, and a lot of our herbs have a shelf life of maybe a year. So it's important for me to know that wonderful treasured plant that I have in the back of my apothecary, how long it's been there. So other labels, you can get all kinds of labels. Make sure you have them from Michael's or other stores like that. You can get fancy labels for jars. You can make your own labels to be fancy with a lot more information on them, like one of our current family students has here, Avery brand. But you can also use mailing labels. So mailing labels come in big sheets like this, and you can get them hundreds at a time, and all the labels you could ever really need. My personal favorite label system includes masking tape. Masking tape has lots of other uses in my home. It stays adhered to my jar really easily. I don't have to worry about it falling off, like my post-it might fall off. I can attach it anywhere on the jar. I typically put labels on the face of the jar, because if I have it on the top of my lid and I take my lid off and I'm making tea and I put my lid down, and this one, hibiscus, is pretty easy to see, but if this were a green leafy herb, it might be hard for me to tell which lid should go on which jar. So I usually put the name of whatever is inside on the glass part of the jar. And those jars can come from any place. I often reuse jars, especially if they started out with herbal products inside of them. I definitely reuse those. you just want to remember that if it's something like a spaghetti jar, spaghetti sauce jar, that's a nice glass jar that could be reused, but it might have stuff on the lid that you don't really want to have on dried herbs. So be mindful of that. The lids are where I usually get hung up there. This wonderful honey jar, I also, if I'm going to be putting liquid into a jar, I make sure it's a jar that had liquid in it before. So honey is a liquid, so this jar is probably designed to have other liquids in it. If it is a jar I'm using for dry things like herbs, I want to make sure it has a nice seal on it and there's not going to be any moisture that can get inside. And I have jars on hand for teas and tinctures, and I'm really considering what I have on hand when I'm thinking of making something. So you might be wondering which herbs to buy. So the herbs that I have are all herbs that at some point in time I got really inspired and wanted to try, or they're herbs that I've been working with for a really long time and I want to make sure are around with me all the time. So there are some herbs that I buy by the pound, which is a big gallon-sized jar, and there are other herbs that I'm like, you know, I wonder how that tastes, I want to spend time with it. I might get just a little bit of that herb. It's another good time to say, one herb that you know 40 uses for it is better than 40 herbs with one use. When you're thinking about tinctures in your apothecary, having a way to organize them can be really helpful. This basket you can find at yard sales and places like that pretty easily. It's a nice way to organize tinctures so that they are not just in a pile inside of your cabinet. It may be hard to know what you have, and so this way you can pull it out and see what's there. I've also seen people use old curio cabinets, so it's a shallow shelf that you line the tinctures up in so that you can, they don't have a back of the cabinet to hide out and you can keep them up close. Like I said, I'm here with the current family students, and they are all in the process of building their own herbal apothecary. And I want to give them a chance to give us thoughts on how they're building their own herbal apothecary. Does anybody want to jump in on that and talk about maybe the herb choices that you've made?
I will. So the first herbs, I'm Dana. First herbs I started out with when I found there's one place, I'm from Lincoln, Nebraska, that had, we have one herbal store, and they had almost all of the first 20 from the roots. So I filled up on a lot of those since I was already kind of familiar, and then I get like one new one every couple weeks and just try to get to know it, see about it, and yeah.
Great, thanks Dana. How do you store it? Where do you store
Or that's what I was just saying. Oh, that was another thing I was gonna say. So I use jars, mostly new mason jars, but I do reuse things for tinctures the way that Maggie has taught us to do. And then I actually bought a label maker because I'm real nerdy and I like to have everything super organized, and I don't have nice handwriting. And so sometimes I'll write something and I can't even read it myself. So the label maker,
Definitely.
it was a good investment.
Thanks. Anybody else?
I'll go. I have, I grow some herbs, so I started with that and drying them and see what they sell at the store in the spice section that I could use as herbs and use those. Just recently with this family class, I've gone beyond my boundaries and come to Orlando a few times to pick up herbs, and I've ordered online. So right now my dry herb is sitting on a kind of bookshelf, waiting for me to have a little more time to get them into those the rest of them into the glass jars that I will make labels for. And I like to print my labels. After I've worked with a liquid, if I'm going to preserve a liquid or make a tincture or an oil, I put the labels after because the substance, the menstruate, can smear the writing on the labels just as a hint. But the I don't have many tinctures. I have oils, a lot of essential oils, and that's because I've been making salves and creams, and I like putting them on cotton and just putting in the room. I don't use a diffuser, but my essential oils go in a basket almost exactly, like I think it's a different color, in my bathroom cabinet, and then I can just slide out the whole thing. I put my uh, oils I use most often in a separate little bowl, like a little pimento spread bowl, and the ones I use for, I organize it by body systems rather than by fragrances, and that helps me stay organized that way. So let's.
Thank you, Rosemary. Anyone else? Thanks for offering up your experiences, and I know that in this class, we spend a lot of time thinking about which herbs should we get at home, because there's so many herbs that can do so many different things, and they overlap. And so having a way to really organize your apothecary, to know what you have in your apothecary, is super important. Labeling, I can't say label it enough. Trust me,